Hello there. Right, so I've spoken about dependent and independent demand many a times, but I've decided to discuss it briefly or at least in a different way. All right, so you're going to see here my table, and in this table you have items and materials, materials with independent demand, materials with dependent demand, and so on. All right, so let me get right into it. In inventory management, you have two main characteristics of items, right? Dependent demand items and independent demand items. Now, inventories are tangible, and inventory is really stock, right? And stock could be so many different things. Stock can be raw materials, sub-assemblies, open stock. Work in progress can be deemed stock as well. So back to the different types of inventories in terms of demand. So dependent demand basically means that one item is dependent on the demand for another. So take for instance this water bottle. If you're manufacturing one water bottle, right, you would need one cover or one cork. You would need one label. I wouldn't show you the label. And one bottle, right? And if you need two bottles, if you're manufacturing two bottles, then you'd need two corks, right? Or bottle covers, and two labels is there, and of course two empty bottles, right? So one item is dependent on the demand of another. So it's like it's pulling one item is pulling the other item. You cannot manufacture a bottle of water without the cover, without the label. It wouldn't be complete, right, guys? So that is dependent demand. You would see this in manufacturing. Dependent demand is quite common in manufacturing, of course. Yeah. For example, the automobile industry, there's dependent demand when you're assembling planes and cars and so on. And you know what? You will also find dependent demand in the service industry. So it's not really manufacturing alone. Let's say you go to purchase a pizza. A pizza has to be assembled, right? So two pizzas would need, a quantity of tomatoes or pineapple, etc., right? But in the main dependent demand, you tend to see that behavior in manufacturing. It's very obvious to the eyes, right? Now, independent demand items are not associated. These items are not associated with a manufacturing type of setting. So, in other words, let's say I own a store, and in that store I sell cell phones, I sell face masks, I sell so many different things, right? I sell eyewear, so a wide range of items. Now, I'm not manufacturing these items, right? I'm just selling these items, and I'm selling it based on what the market wants, what the market needs. Maybe the market needs this type of eyewear, all right? Maybe the market needs this type of phone or whatever, right? So that is independent demand, right? One item is not dependent on the demand of another, right? So there's no manufacturing happening, so there's no nomenclature of items, right, bringing together one item or one assembly, right? That you will find in dependent demand inventory. Now, why do we need to know the difference? There's one main reason. The reason why we need to know the difference is this. We tend to use different methods of managing these inventories. Usually for dependent demand inventories, as you see there, we may find ourselves using material requirement planning or some requirement planning software. So MRP is material requirement planning, and that has been stepped up to MRP2, manufacturer resource planning, and we have gotten to another point, what we call ERP. So ERP can be used in dependent demand inventory as well, right? Of course, right? And ERP can be used in independent demand inventory management. It's a big platform, right? But the very history and nature of MRP is the fact that MRP was designed for production planning. Hence the reason why we have MRP there as a suitable tool for dependent demand inventories. So you may find, let's say, a large manufacturing company using an ERP platform, but within that platform, there's MRP working behind the scenes, right? All right, so MRP2, ERP. So which is another conversation, but I want you to bear in mind that MRP in itself is a production planning tool, right? And we did say that dependent demand inventories, we'll find those inventories in production. Now, shift a bit to independent. In independent demand inventories, we see economic order quantity as a tool. We see reorder point systems. These days, we are using, you know what we're using? We're using big data analytics, right? So we're using sophisticated, very complex, because our inventories are very complex. We're using sophisticated and very complex tools to help manage these inventories, because the market is changing constantly. As we know, how the bullwhip effect, we know the impact of the bullwhip effect, right? The behavior, the up and down movements of the market, right? The vulnerability of supply chains from the bullwhip effect. So we need tools to help us predict what the market may want, help us predict when the market may want it, help us predict what type of demand we might be working with this season, right? All right, things like that. So yes, EOQ is still relevant and reorder point systems, yes, but for large organizations, the Walmarts and the Amazons, they need more powerful platforms, right? Nice. Now, one other thing. So I have a question, and I always ask this question: can we find independent demand inventories within dependent demand within a dependent demand setting? In other words, can I find, or would we find, independent demand inventories at Boeing? And Boeing, we know, is a manufacturer. The answer to that is yes, of course, because at Boeing they need not just spare parts that goes onto the plane, right? They also need gloves. They also need fuel for, oil maybe for a drilling machine or a rivet gun, and you know, all these things. So that falls under the category of MROs, maintenance, repair, and operating supplies, right? So MROs, you can't get away from them. Maintenance, repair, and operating supplies, fuel, tissue paper, and so on. These are independent demand items in that they are not associated with manufacturing directly, right? I often call them indirect inventory items, yes? So they support the operation, but the tissue paper will not be fitted onto the aircraft. No. Right? The tissue paper will be on the aircraft for the passengers to use or somewhere else, right? So hope we got that clear. Dependent demand inventories, independent demand inventories must be managed differently, have been managed differently, right? These days we're using, as I mentioned, all these sophisticated software to help us manage independent demand portfolio, right? What we call anticipatory based methods, okay? All right, I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you very much.